This month, we are kicking off Bi Health Awareness Month for 2025, an initiative led by the Bisexual Resource Center out of Boston. And each episode will be focusing on a different piece of the Bi Plus health puzzle.
That's right. We'll be diving into mental health, intimate partner violence, physical health, and more. But today, we're shining a light on sexual health and HIV, an area where Bi Plus folks often face unique challenges and a whole lot of misinformation.
Exactly. We'll talk about safer sex strategies, navigating sexual health conversations with partners, and why Bi Plus people might fall through the cracks when it comes to HIV testing and education. If you've ever felt like your doctor just didn't get it, or you're nervous about coming out to your healthcare provider, this episode is definitely for you.
And while these issues can be serious, remember, there are amazing resources out there. We are here to point you to some valuable links and resources and to remind you that you are not alone. You are not alone and wanting to take control of your health.
So let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Bi Plus sexual health and learn how to advocate for ourselves in the healthcare system. You ready, Steve?
I think I am. This is Give It To Me Bi Plus Health Month 2025. I guess I'm not ready. 2025 edition. Let's get started.
This is Give It To Me Bi, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything from a Bi Plus perspective. Now, let us give it to you bi. Give It To Me Bi acknowledge that we live and work on Gadigal land. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty was never ceded. Hello, my love.
Happy Mardi Gras, beautiful.
Happy Mardi Gras. Oh my gosh, I'm excited. I grew up obviously knowing about Mardi Gras, but this will be my first ever time being in the parade.
That's wild.
It's like a bucket list moment. You were just telling me you've been in the parade 7 times or something?
Minimum 7 times. It could be 8, lost count.
Wow.
But you are in for a treat because there's nothing like your first time. Honestly, Chad, it is like, I think we've mentioned this before. So there's what, 20,000 marches, so 20,000 people in the parade, 200,000 people on the streets, millions watching on TV. You are surrounded, like the staging area where you're going to be, I don't want to give it away too much for you, but like you're surrounded by skies. It's in a big park in the middle of our downtown, our CBD here in Sydney. And the thump of all the music off the skyscrapers and like the lights all reflect off you are inside a disco, like the queerest disco ball on the planet.
Yes, it's so good.
With 20,000 strangers who immediately become your best friend. It's
so fun.
I can't wait to see you in the staging area as well.
I'm excited because I feel like at least watching at home, you watch it and if there's much representation or not, you get what you get at home, right? But I think when you're in it, I'm just excited to be in the buzz of it all, like that bi buzz and just seeing all the other different communities represented. I love to see people kind of waving a flag for the thing that represents them or that they're into, and that's super cool.
I just know how like overwhelmed you're going to be. It is going to be so awesome for you because even me, so after so many years, it's so exciting. I describe like turning up to the staging area for the parade as like a scene from Bring It On.
Oh my gosh, great.
Fave movie. Like potentially a biconic film.
Burr, it's cold in here.
It's here. I said there must be some tourists in the... Don't get me started. And you know how they like turn up to the nationals and they walk in and they're all a little bit nervous, but they're all together in their team.
Yeah.
And then they see all the other teams from around the country and their different outfits and they're doing their different routines. And you're like, oh, look at them over there. Like, oh, they're really good. Like, oh, they're not that great. And there's like all this noise and excitement and nervousness. It's exactly like that.
I feel like I'm going to be watching people get their kind of dance on and going through their routines. And I specifically put my hand up for a ticket of not dancing. And I feel like, am I going to regret this? Am I going to be just walking looking a bit boring. I feel like I should be representing a little bit harder. I don't know.
No, you're not going to regret it because I've been in 2-hour-long rehearsals every week for the last 2 months. So
I do not regret that. Yeah.
Actually, the YouTube. So this is a prompt for everyone to watch our YouTube channel. I have my entire outfit.
Oh my gosh, show us. I will do an audio description for everyone.
Now, I'm marching with my gym,
Yes.
City Gym, established in 1978, the same year that Mardi Gras was established. Now, naturally, we work hard and we don't want to cover our bodies. So this is the entirety of the outfit. It is a single. Okay.
We are looking at, what am I looking at? This is a studded shoulder pad. Imagine like Super Saiyan, like Vegeta shoulder pad with studs and some drapery, kind of like a single cape for a single shoulder. And that's it? What, some hot pants? Like, what goes along with it? A G-string.
And my little spanky pants.
And some short shorts. Very short shorts.
Great. Very short shorts. No, another Bring It On reference. My spanky pants.
Oh, spanky pants.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you heard that, but yes, spanky pants. I can and Bring It On.
My outfit is a little bit more modest than that. I think we've got tank tops and just whatever you want to wear with them. So I'm marching with Biconic. Thank you to everybody who rallied behind this one this year. We got it filled and everyone's getting involved. But yes, I think we've got tank tops with the Biconic logo, and then it's just wear whatever you're comfortable with, which I appreciate. It's I've not been working out for bodybuilding. So I don't think the Super Saiyan camp Gaga shoulder pad is on my radar.
This is the great thing also about the parade is you can choose what level of difficulty you want. So I've chosen the hard level where you are near naked in front of 200,000 people doing full choreography. And then there's the much more relaxed and potentially more enjoyable level where you actually get to just walk down and soak up the atmosphere.
Listen, I'm a never dude. I'm not nude in front of myself, so I don't think I'm doing it for the parade. That's awesome. Steve, I want to know, we've been busy bees because it's Mardi Gras season. Yes. What are your highlights this week? I'm sure you've got a couple. You've been out and about.
Yeah. Yes. So it's queer Christmas, which means that there is a lot on. Last night, I was at an event for Soho House. I was invited as an ambassador for Utopia Sydney, the world's largest LGBTIQ plus cultural centre, which is located right here in Sydney. Everyone should go check it out. And it was great. It was on the rooftop of the Museum of Contemporary Art. If you go onto my Instagram, I posted some really great photos. It's we've just got the most amazing view of the bridge and the Opera House. And it was just
pretty prime real estate down at the MCA.
Yeah, it was a very fancy event. So it was queer celebrity spotting. So like like the world famous DJ Honey Dijon was standing over there, like staring. And then like I'm having the breadsticks over here because I'm carb loading. And there are a few other cool people and that I got to have a chat with. So that was really nice, especially because I'm normally a bit of a homebody and usually because I'm just too exhausted to go out. And I, even in the Uber on the way there, I was like, oh, but then when I got there, it was really nice. What was your highlight?
Oh, yeah, cool. I've got a few this week. Again, I'm a kind of a homebody too. And so getting out of the house, Heidi's really kind of holding down the fort with Dallas and Nash this week. Very grateful to Heidi. So I can get out and represent not just the podcast, but also Sydney by Plus Network at a few different events. I was at...
yes.
I get to call out one of my favorite people, one of Steve's favorite people, and a listener of the podcast.
Do not speak on my behalf. I don't know who you're about to mention, but I will let you know.
City of Sydney councillor Adam Walling, who I met kind of recently through Steve, and Steve's known for a few years now, hosted their now annual event Out Loud, which is put on by Councillor Adam Walling, was hosted by Clover Moore, our Sydney Lord Mayor. And it was wonderful. Steve actually spoke at the event last year, which
one of the founding speakers.
Speakers, there we are. And it was just so wonderful. I got to go along with my fellow Sydney by Plus network leadership team, which is awesome, and got to meet a bunch of people, got to see friend of the pod, Christy Newman from our episode 3 or 4. Christy was one of the speakers, and
I booked Christy for that. I was just they asked me, who's a bicon that you want on there? And I'm like, Professor Christy Newman needs to be on that podium. How was it, Chad?
Honestly,
How were they?
So all the speakers were fantastic, like really, really good.
That's what every parent says about their children. But tell us about your favorite Christy.
My favorite was Christy. I am a little bit smitten with everything that comes out of Christy's mouth. They're so just incredible, and spoke about this moment in time. Christy obviously is a researcher and works, as we discussed in that episode, in like the crossover of sexuality, sex, gender, that kind of thing. And obviously this moment in time is pretty fraught for Christy. Christy also spoke about being non-binary and bisexual and being a parent as well. And all these different areas of Christy's life are kind of under attack at the moment. And it really got to me, and I shed quite a few tears during Christy's speech, and so I will kiss the ground that Christy walks on. I'm kind of obsessed. We had a great chat afterwards about doing some more collaborations together. But okay, so the whole thing was a bit of a bylight to turn up and show up for the bi community. But when I entered, I walked in, was chatting with some friends, and then I heard someone say, "Oh, hi, Chad," and like kind of waved at me from a distance, and then turned to a friend and say, "Oh, do you know Chad?" And the person they were talking to said, "The bisexual?" And then turned around and like, "Oh, Chad, the bisexual." And I was like, oh my gosh, what a hilarious moment. My brand now that goes ahead of me is Chad the bisexual, and I find that so
it's
funny.
all coming to play.
It's so funny, and I loved it. It was really great. Got to meet some wonderful people, and then the next night I got to go along to Queer Screen. So this is like a queer short film festival. This night in particular was hosted by our friends at Biconic. They've been kind of co-hosting it for a few years now. I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting like really low-level student films, which, I mean, student films, we love to see it. But it wasn't that. It was a night of really high-quality, high-caliber stories of bisexuality.
Yeah,
there were,
real deal.
there were some, and we kind of chatted throughout the night, there were definitely themes of hypersexuality, which was intriguing. Obviously, some themes just are always ever present. But at the start of the night, Brie was very gracious and allowed me to get up to speak and introduce the podcast and introduce Sydney Bi Plus Network, which was awesome. I'm getting better at my 30 seconds to prepare in front of public speaking. And I printed out some last minute flyers for everyone to put on all the seats. And I was really proud of it. I'll share a photo online, but it was like a trifold brochure, and it just had, "Oh my God, it's a bisexual," and just with a hand pointing at the person about to sit down. And it got some good laughs and some good photos from people, which was great. And it was just really wonderful to be in a packed room. I celebrated on the microphone. I said, "Hey, thank you for turning up and filling the room. Like, it shows that we want more of these events. It's so important. We talk about it a lot here. So again, thank you to everyone for coming along to that. And now, hopefully, for tuning in, because I saw a few people subscribe to the podcast when we were there. So those are my bylights.
Great. All right, you got two bylights. I need to throw in the second one that I just remembered. So my second bylight, because I will get murdered if I don't mention it.
Yep.
Because I'm like, wait, why wasn't I at the Out Loud event? I'm like, oh yeah. So my boyfriend, my partner, Chris, is
Hi, Chris.
on the Real Housewives of Sydney.
Yes.
So I'm sure our listeners, especially our American listeners, know about the Real Housewives franchise, and we have one here in Sydney. And very strangely, my partner is on it. His best friend Caroline is one of the housewives, and she's now a close friend of mine. It was the premiere event, so it was the premiere of the first episode coming out.
How was it? Was it fun?
Of this new season? Yeah, it was really fun. So a few of the housewives are there and their posses, and it's just like, I've got to know them as themselves, and so to watch your partner and your friend on TV, like full glam, and it's a very glamorous show. It's the Real Housewives, is very funny as well. And also, like, you hear about all the I hate
the drama.
Yeah,
all the
drama because it's real life.
Yeah.
And like, so I hear about it in person, and like, to support your friend through something they're going through, but you haven't been able to see it because it's stuff on a TV show. And then when you see it on TV, it's actually just given me so much more respect for the people that I love. It's also just a strange glimpse into Hollywood, I guess.
Reality TV is interesting because it's real people in real circumstances, but it is produced. And so there's these moments that of like hyper reality or these kind of produced moments, which is really fascinating.
And Caroline has said that she wants to be on the pod, so we might have our own Real Housewife on the Give It To Me by pod.
So is this a scoop? Are you going to be on the next season of Real Housewives of Sydney? Are you a Real Housewife?
I will push. Oh, why do you think I got with Chris? It's so I could be famous. Joking. Love you, honey. I don't know if there'll even be a next season. Who knows? But,
Sure. I actually saw you on news.com, which I rarely tread into those waters. I think they just had an article and they'd pinched someone's promo video for it, and you were in it. One little shot of it next to Chris. I was like, oh, there's my Steve.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Send it to me.
Yeah, I will. So as you would have picked up from the title of the episode and the intro, we are talking about bi+ health. This is something Steve and I are particularly passionate about. And I think you'll probably see a lot of people that work in the bi+ space, advocacy space, are also really passionate about. It is one of the things that affects bisexual population like more so than people realize. And I think one of the issues that I find is more so than bisexual people realize. And that's one of the reasons why we want to talk about it. The main reason is because it's Bi+ Health Awareness Month, which is an initiative started by the Bisexual Resource Center out of Boston, Massachusetts. And so we're latching onto that. We're doing a whole month of it. We did a month of pop culture, keep things light, and we're doing a month of health. And so this could be light, but it's serious. So we want to make sure that we're kind of balancing out the content for the year. So we've been very intentional about that. But yes, before we start, Steve made a very good point, which I'm going to honor, is that we are not medical professionals. So anything we talk about here is based on our experiences or based on studies, researches, publications that we have referenced. Those things could be outdated. It could be specific to a region, specific to a demographic that might be true to your circumstances. Always check with a medical professional to make sure that you get the most accurate, hopefully, and up-to-date information for your circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why, like, when I do a lot of health education, like I guess one of my job titles is a health educator. And it's, and we sort of make the point to speak to the systems that create these health disparities. Speak about the ways in which we tackle these health disparities. I always hesitate to talk about specific health issues because that's a unique thing to you. Because the other thing is, so we say, like, very true broad statement, bi+ people have the worst social and health outcomes of the LGBTIQ+ community. But it's not because we're bisexual, and it's got nothing to do with our bisexuality. But there are these structural reasons why this happens. And so when it comes down to, the actual issues that you got with their mental health or physical health, that is something specific to you and something that you need to work with a health professional to work through.
It's a really great thing to start with, I think, Steve, because when I hear, and I know when other people have heard things like, oh, this population have higher rates of X, Y, and Z, we believe it to be an issue in being inherently that population, not all the systemic things that point at and create an existence around that population that can affect them negatively. Obviously, we see this when it pertains to, say, women and healthcare, or people of color and healthcare. These different populations aren't inherently have things about them that make healthcare hard. Healthcare is made hard around those populations. And the same is true about bisexual populations.
During the AIDS crisis, there were, when it was originally called GRID, the gay-related immune deficiency, there were people, very intelligent people, that believed that homosexuality itself caused the gay-related immune deficiency, that it was something inherent in in homosexuality. Funny enough, they never mentioned bisexuality.
Well,
and
not in that capacity. They mention it in other capacities.
yes. And we'll get into that. But, it is important to make that point that these things are not inherent. Bisexuality doesn't cause poor mental health.
Yeah, it's a good point to make sure we start from a baseline of that understanding that none of these things cause it, right? But there are causes, and the causes are more often than not stigma, and how stigma weaves its slimy little hands into all the different ways that can manifest. Stigma really is perceptions that can negatively affect people or negatively influence how someone has access to systems, resources, and good outcomes. And so that's really at the heart of this. And so we know as bisexual people and the bisexual community that we are on the receiving end of what we call double discrimination, right? So this is discrimination from within and outside of the LGBTQIA plus community. And those different types of stigma can be numerous. It could be invalidating our existence and experience. It could be denying it altogether. It can be assumptions around hypersexuality. It could be assumptions around how you must or mustn't turn up in relationships. And so all of these things can influence stigma kind of outside in, kind of from other people towards bisexual people. But really importantly, it can also affect internalized stigma. So it can actually affect how we then go and seek treatment or preventative care or taking measures to look after ourselves. And that stigma is just as important to check. And the really cool thing is that's something that we can do. So someone listening today to us or us ourselves can go, cool, I'm going to take charge of this part of this, and I'm going to work on myself and kind of de-shackling myself from that internalized stigma. Yes, we've got a bigger fight as it comes to systems and resources, those types of things, and that's what we're doing collectively together. But we can work on the internal stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all part of the framework that we talk about in health. So for our listeners, if you're new to the pod, I do work in LGBTIQ plus health and in HIV health. So I'm on the board of our national HIV body, and I am a sexual health researcher at the Kirby Institute at the University of New South Wales. The way we talk, so this is all part of the social determinants of health, and stigma is a really main part of these social determinants of health. And that's basically looking at how society determines the outcomes of our health. If a government is wanting to save money or are just too lazy, or if any sort of organization, anyone is too lazy, they will say, we've got mental health professionals, that's enough. And then from a social determinants of health point of view, you would say, we need mental health professionals with specific knowledge, potentially even lived experience in areas where we see particularly high negative health outcomes in particular populations.
Yeah.
And we in the bi plus community sort of face a double level of difficulty here, because we are within the LGBTIQ plus community and we are sort of consumed by that, even though we have far more unique needs. And so when we sort of have to push an extra step, there's that stigma. Not only we experience stigma as queer people, and we experience stigma as bi plus people. We face sort of doubling of everything. And it's the argument that we need to make. It's an argument that needs to be made strongly, is that we are unique. We have unique needs. We have more than enough research now to prove our point and then move to a point where we actually create some change. And at the end of the day, this is something you and I talk about a lot on the pod. Demographics cannot be denied. And we are facing an ocean, a tsunami of bi plus people. I mean, we've always been here, but people who are admitting it to not only themselves, but to the world. Our numbers are growing and growing and growing of people identifying as bi plus. And we don't have a system that's set up for that. There will come a point where You just have to do something about it. So that's a bit of hope. That's a bit of hope.
Yeah, the hope stuff is cool. There is more and more and more, and it will reach a breaking point of like, oh, okay, now
Hopefully it doesn't break.
Right? Of or like a tipping point rather of
yeah.
Things are now active and available. So things like the Bish study, which I believe is finishing today, which is very exciting. Thank you to everyone for participating in it. We've got some really wonderful outcomes that will come from that, which is really cool. That is Australia's largest maybe the world's largest specific sexual health study on bisexuality, which is awesome. And so that kind of data goes a long way to be able to petition for resources, funding, all that kind of stuff. And it is exciting to start to see people putting in some solid effort, because that takes time, it takes resources. And I mean, I've spent the afternoon writing a grant proposal. But like getting resources, this is not easy, and there's a lot of factors that go into making someone give a shit or approve. Why do you deserve to have the funding versus this population? Because it's always a balance. There's a lot of political motivation and kind of making sure everyone is represented enough to be able to make sure the kind of constituents of an area are happy and looked after. And so we'll finally have some information to do that, which is cool. But you're so right. It's like, I like that idea of social determinants because it speaks to a larger context. It's not just bisexual people. It's not just people of color. It's not just, it's all these other things of like income and social protection.
Yes.
It's education and access to education. Things like job security and unemployment. Things like
your location,
food insecurity, housing, basic amenities, those types of things. Early childhood development. I mean, I did a semester of psychology before I dropped out because of life circumstances, and that semester was about the childhood development, and it just makes you realize how important things are so early in life. And so these things are a long play. It's a long game. So we're going to talk over the month about a lot of different topics as it pertains to bi health. Today's episode, more specifically, we're going to talk about sexual health and we're going to talk about HIV. Now, obviously, we've talked about both of these things a little bit in the past, but this is our opportunity to kind of dig in. Where do you want to kick things off?
Gonorrhea, it sucks. But hey, everyone, it's treatable.
Is that where we're starting? We're starting gonorrhea?
That's where I've chosen to start.
Great,
but,
I love it.
You asked the question.
I will be really real. I am very naive as it pertains to gonorrhea.
No, I want to say something very strong and very clearly. Sexual health, STIs, sexually transmitted infections, they're a symptom of sex. They're a symptom of having a sex life. They're a symptom of having human connection and physical, intimate connection with other human beings. It's not something to be ashamed of or afraid of. We have incredible medical interventions. We have incredible preventatives. Sexual health is not a taboo topic. It's something that everyone can talk about, something that everyone should talk about and think about. It's so funny. There's a huge stigma around sexual health. And I don't know. It's something I've like you just said. What do you want to talk about first? Oh, how much gonorrhea sucks. Like it's not fun, but I got treated and I was fine. I've always been very lucky to never really have been ashamed of it because I realized very early on, like, oh, okay. Sometimes you have sex, and sometimes you get an STI. And the sun will rise again tomorrow.
Yeah, it's almost at a certain point. Well, I guess it depends on your friendship group, is like more likely people will have had STIs than not having STIs, right? Yes. I mean, I remember when I grew up, we called them STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. Now it's sexually transmitted infections is the more accurate term.
Actually, very accurate. If you want to, when you'll meet one stickler of a professor at like a conference, it's sexually transmissible infection.
Oh, thank you. Great. And so it was the thing that you kind of ribbed each other for, that you
I've had that argument with so many people.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, because like that was like, it's actually transmissible, and it's like, let's just talk to human beings. They know what transmitted means. Let's call it transmitted.
That's so funny. I'm looking at a document that says transmitted, so maybe it's regional. I don't know. It was the thing that you kind of made jokes about, tease each other about, oh, herpes, or like, oh, you're going to get this. I mean, it's not made easier when things like South Park are doing songs about AIDS and laughing, ha ha ha, AIDS. And like at my high school, that was a bit. Like you would sing the Everybody's Got AIDS song, and it was such a funny ha ha ha. That was my first introduction to what AIDS was. One of in an open setting, right?
Yeah.
And so sexual health, it generally in this country and most countries is failing, and failing our kids, failing us as we grow older, because there's so much unlearning and relearning that has to take place. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is just a part of having a sex life. Sometimes not even having a sex life. Some people can get sexually transmissible infections.
No, we're saying transmitted on the show, people. I'm not being that stickler.
That's great. Some people have had them outside of the context of sex. That is possible too. So it is just a fact of life. And the more plainly we can talk about it, the better, which is awesome.
I'm so glad you said that as well, because there are a lot of myths around sexual health, and a lot of myths around sexual health protection and things like that. And so like bacterial STIs, things like herpes, things like gonorrhea, they're purely by physical contact. And the bacteria itself can, I hope, I'll just use plain language here, can, for example, on a person with a penis, the bacteria can be beyond the shaft of your penis. It can be in the pubic area. So a condom increases protection greatly, but it doesn't completely protect you. And so, like, there are these myths around the idea of protection versus not being protected. A lot of people have this black and white idea, and because we moralize around STIs a lot and around sexual health as well, there's a right way and a wrong way. There's a good and a bad. You're a good or a bad person. You're a good or you're a good person if you don't get an STI. You're a bad person if you do get an STI. You're a good person if you use protection. You're a bad person if you don't use protection, or if you don't use my approved idea of protection, because there is still a lot of stigma around different forms of protection.
And the moralizing comes into language as well. So like we've heard a lot of people say, are you clean? Right? It's the idea of something is clean or dirty, therefore good or bad. Let's maybe put a pin in it straight away. That is inappropriate language, the phrasing of clean. Some people could say clear, and that's a bit better, but generally speaking, you could say, have you been tested? Right? Or do you know your STI status or whatever?
Status,
is the more appropriate way to do it. And the more we kind of, again, deshackle ourselves from this moral nature around it, then it's just a normal conversation. It's just a part of hooking up, right? And also, it's a part of that kind of consent language and that consent conversation of like, hey, cool, just to make sure everything's out in the air. What are you into? Oh, you're into choking and you're into butt stuff or whatever. Oh, and by the way, I got tested last week and everything. My status is this. And it's just, that just becomes a normal part of the conversation. You don't have to kind of go, oh, hang your head in shame. Fuck, I think maybe I have herpes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like,
in the HIV world. So everyone, I'm very proudly a person living with HIV. I say that because use the word proud because there's a lot of shame around HIV. So rather than be ashamed, I'd rather be proud. So I am proudly a person living with HIV. I'm HIV positive, and working in the HIV space, we talk about shared responsibility. And so that's the responsibility of both partners to be doing what they need to do to prevent onward transmission of HIV, or if we're going to talk about sexual health, other STIs. And so, in those conversations, there's a shared responsibility to either ask or offer information. So you mentioned there in a conversation like, oh, I'm into this, I'm into this, I'm into this. Also, I was recently tested and I have no HIV and I have no STIs as of my last test. And that's very important as well. It's as of my last test. You don't actually currently know.
No one ever actually
No one
knows
ever
in the
actually
moment.
knows. No, because about window periods and all sorts. And this is the other thing about moralizing. It's like you actually don't know. So no moralizing on this show here, everyone. So it's really great to be able to offer that information because it can actually be quite awkward to ask for that information because you feel, and it's not awkward at all. Like, please, everyone, like, ask. It is, as we say, and it's shared responsibility. It's your responsibility to ask if you. It's
almost like a handshake, right? Like you offering your hand shows someone else that you are wanting a handshake, and then they can choose to shake your hand back. So offering your whatever consent and offering your status that you know of, then they can offer back and kind of accept that, I guess, consent handshake.
Handshaking. Is that what we're calling it now?
That's what we're calling it.
Oh.
Now, there is an interesting part of this sexual health conversation that is quite unique to bisexual people inside of the LGBTQIA plus umbrella, and that is the fact that pregnancy is a potential outcome of sex with bisexual people. That is not the case in a lot of queer sexual health conversations.
Honestly, so like in the age of PrEP, which is the preventative pill for HIV, my male friends will be like, Steve, why are you still wearing condoms? And I'm like, because I can get people pregnant, right? And they're like, oh yeah, and I'm like, okay, thank you very much. So they're just like, he still has to wear condoms. I'm like, excuse me.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, everyone. Well, no one has to do anything really,
no.
but I'm
not ready to be a dad yet.
Exactly, and let me tell you, even if you're ready, you're not ready. as a parent, for those who may not know that I'm a parent, it's something that isn't talked about in many queer media, either like kind of entertainment media, but also any kind of publications around sex and sexual health. Is that like that is a factor? Is that we need to consider that pregnancy, whether wanted or unwanted pregnancies, or how we manifest or navigate the conversations around pregnancy is important as well. So, I mean, most people who are having casual sex aren't going out to have casual sex to get pregnant, right? That's typically not the kind of aim of casual sex. But it is a part of the sexual landscape, and so that's something to consider as well. And especially like there are folks in our community who have multiple partners, and considering how that affects multiple people is obviously something to consider as well. So again, having safe sex in terms of pregnancy safe sex or contraceptives. So that's condoms, and that's not the pull-out method. That's if you are that way inclined, that could be the pill. There's a large conversation around the pill. If you're interested, there's a fantastic book I read last year called How the Pill Changes Everything. It's amazing. So there's a lot of conversation around the pill. If you are someone with a uterus, you're probably aware of those conversations. So it is interesting to be in a queer space and talk about pregnancy. Like I'm a dad. Like, right. It's something I've navigated fully. But I don't think I've ever really turned up to many queer spaces and talked about pregnancy outside of like the idea of surrogacy, right? And or like isn't that bizarre?
Yeah, it's really funny because I working in queer health and in HIV, the second, and even with queer, if it's a queer health space, and I bring up contraception, you see them go, oh yeah. You forget that you have to actually think about that. I'm like, yes, I have to very strongly think about that. I'm even
clocking my language that I said, as a parent, kind of making this presumption that means that being a parent, I was involved in a pregnancy, right? Like, that's my bias, right? And that's not the case for queer people who are parents all the time. So apologies for that language. But yeah, it's I think it's clunky for most people because it's
Yeah.
just not spoken about that much.
Yeah. And like, in queer health, especially for queer men, HIV sort of sucks up all the oxygen in the room. So HIV is the thing you need to really be worried about. Other STIs, hey, you just get tested and treated, and contraception doesn't exist. And so I would love for that to become just a normal part of queer male health. Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you brought up, because it is. I experience it socially and also within the systems of healthcare.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many avenues to go down when it talks about sexual health. I'm really intrigued, and I started having this conversation at Fair Day. Actually, we at the Sydney Bi Plus Network, we were set up right next to the I forget the organization's name, but they were the asexual stand, and we had a really great productive conversation on I had a parent ask me, how do you talk about sexuality with kids, and we had the conversation with the asexuality folks and talking about how do you describe asexuality in an age appropriate manner to kids, and it made me think just generally, how do you do sex education? How do you do it in a responsible, informed, thoughtful manner? And there are some really great resources about one, age appropriateness, but also the different almost circles or verticals inside of the sexuality experience that can make the conversation less about boys and gender and all that kind of stuff. Talks about things like intimacy. That can be a whole topic. You can talk about intimacy in terms of caring and sharing and loving and liking and vulnerability, that kind of stuff. You can talk about sexual identity. You can talk about biological sex, gender identification, gender expression, and then you could talk about sensuality. So that one was interesting that I read about. It was things like stimuli. It can be about sexual response. It could be body image and fantasy. There was another one that was sexualization, so things like flirting and media, education, withholding sex, sexual harassment, those types of things. And then sexual health and reproduction. So kind of what we were just talking about. So that, like, what we're talking about so far in the podcast is kind of one circle of that larger sexual education model, I guess. And I found that so fascinating. I was like, oh, okay. As a parent now, this is something I need to be aware of how I talk about it and how I frame it will kind of set someone's life up. Like it's going to frame how they approach this for the rest of their life, or have to unlearn everything I teach them if it's done poorly.
Yeah. I love the intimacy route. Because I love intimacy. I think is probably the way that things are heading. It's interesting. Like a few years ago in the sexual health sector, there was the talk about moving away from talking about boys and girls and boys and boys and girls and girls, and moving towards talking about body parts. So we're just going to talk about body parts now. So what are body parts doing? And then there's now a conversation about, well, actually we're now just going to talk about intimacy, because why talk about body parts when it can actually be much broader than that? Especially like, looking at my earlier example of just simple skin contact. It doesn't have to be, if we look at mpox, formerly known as monkeypox, that doesn't necessarily require sex. It is transmitted very often during sex, but it is a more accurate way to describe it is it is transmitted most commonly during intimacy. During an intimate physical moment. And so how do you talk about that in terms of parts? Because that is, say, your belly's touching will transmit this infection. It's not the actual act of sex itself. And so when it comes to sexual health, there's always an evolving conversation around how do we actually accurately describe these things. And yeah, it's interesting where it goes. And I think these moves towards, moving away from really specific language around sexuality, boys and boys, girls and girls, all that sort of stuff, and moving towards just more of a holistic understanding of sexual health. It removes some of the stigma. If we're talking about intimacy, because intimacy, I think, is viewed as probably has more positive connotations. And I think this actually benefits us as bi+ people, because it is moving away from sort of those black and white situations. And, I don't mind saying, like, I live in a gray. I live in the gray. I live in the spectrum. And so having that sort of language and having access to that language and using it is really cool.
Yeah. One of the things I find fascinating about this conversation about bisexuality and sexual health is the idea that bisexual people are less likely to be out to people in the world, right? So we know this to be true about being less out to, say, their partners, less out to their friends and family, and then broadly. I can't remember the rates, but it's quite a large disparity as opposed to, say, gay and lesbian folks. Now, this is also true when being out to healthcare providers. And so something like 30 to 39% of bisexual people aren't out to their provider, which is quite different to, say, 10 to 15% of gay and lesbian individuals. And some of those reasons, like you're saying before, can influence the health outcomes that we're talking about before. So we know that the risk factors for bisexual people, we know that bisexual community faces really striking rates of poor health. And that's ranging from cancer to obesity, sexually transmitted infections, and mental health. Obviously, we'll talk about some of those other things on other episodes. But it's interesting that it can be about this sharing and the disclosure. And obviously the conversation around coming out can be tricky because, like, how safe are we to come out? We know that coming out to people who don't necessarily understand or are sympathetic to our lived experiences, that can make that hard for us.
I don't think I'm out to my GP.
You know?
No, other than you, now that you're the flag bearing bisexual, I like to consider myself a pretty well known bisexual, and yeah, even I, and this is what I want our listeners as well to not feel bad. Even I'm not out to my doctor.
Well, yeah,
and that's a problem.
I think I told the story previously, and I've told you before, is that I went to my GP to get a mental health plan a few years ago. I was in a kind of depressive episode for an extended period of time. I was like, okay, I need to sort something out.
Yeah.
Went to get a mental health plan. For those that don't know, that is a plan in Australia where you can get subsidized mental health services. So you can go to a therapist for slightly cheaper. And I talked about my partner's gender. And so the doctor put down on my mental health plan, patient is straight, partner supportive. And I was like, okay, well, we didn't talk about this. And my sexuality wasn't what I came in to talk about. It's funny that you put that down. So I called them and said, hey, this is now inaccurate. And they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Just leave it. I said, no. One, this is now a record. This is a health record now, and you've inaccurately represented me. Please change it. And they were so resistant to changing it, but I pushed them for it.
Yeah.
And then, so I got it back and it said bisexual, partner supportive. And that to me made a really big difference. And it meant that when I went to whoever it was next who was going to receive that mental health plan, that the first thing they see about me wasn't a lie and it wasn't inaccurate information. And so in that moment,
knows what they they might have attended a conference or read a book, and they could bring that knowledge in, even if you're not in there for a reason, anything to do with your bisexuality. You never know where it could help.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, like where I'm in two minds with my GP. I'm like, the things that are generally seen for bisexuality has got nothing to do with it. But who knows? Who knows if there is a moment where it is actually really, really important.
And this is what we've talked about recently, is this kind of whole person principle of like, cool, the things that you're going to your doctor about aren't necessarily bisexual related things, which we know is kind of a lie because it's related to you. It is a bisexual related experience, right? So if you're going in with the flu, that frankly is a bisexual flu, right? It's a flu that a bisexual has. And so it creates a new context for healthcare providers, right? A healthcare provider can go, oh, actually, yeah, I do know Steve. And Steve, my bisexual patient, has experienced these things. And actually, maybe, oh, yeah, Chad, that was a mental health referral and they're bisexual. Maybe there's something about that I need to look into, mental health and bisexuality. Hey, yeah, that actually really is. And thank you for looking into it. Like, what a great opportunity you could provide if you feel safe to do so, that healthcare providers through you, like you could be a gateway to that new understanding. Because we know that the Bi Resource Center have some fantastic resources. Obviously, it's in the name. They've got some resources for healthcare providers, and they've got resources that specifically call out bi patients are less likely to come out to you. And that means that they're likely influenced by the amount of bisexual erasure and bi plus antagonism that the bi community faces. And so as a result, the health of bi patients may suffer since their health needs are unique. So it implores them to actually ask patients how they identify, not just describe their experience. So some people say, I am a man and I'm sleeping with men. So you will assume my patient is queer, sure, but you will assume they're gay. But still, even if you get signifiers like that or story moments like that, that you say, oh, and what is your identity? Like, how do you identify? So, oh, okay, cool. Don't make the assumption. And so, yeah, there are some good resources for healthcare providers as well as bisexual individuals as well.
Yeah, I do remember like my last GP, general practitioner. That's just your usual doctor. Yeah, I remember he knew my sexuality, but every question he'd be like, "Oh, and the guys he's sleeping with," and I'm like, "And girls." And I was constantly having to repeat, like, correct them. And so, because this is at an LGBTIQ plus clinic, and ironically that they don't acknowledge that bi men exist, or let alone have one run of them, this particular doctor, but they retired not long after, so I think they were just past the due date. He was past the due date. He was a good doctor otherwise. And so from that experience, that's probably tainted my experience of being out in a healthcare setting. But you know what, having this conversation with you right now, I'm having the realization that even if it hasn't got to do with the thing that I'm actually seeking help for, I think just being affirmed within that space, if my doctor were to use non-gendered or multi-gendered language with me, that in that very moment would make me feel good. And that's A, good for me, B, good for them because I'll give them 4.5 stars on Google instead of just a 4 stars.
Why not 5?
So they have, no one gets a 5.
No one gets a 5. No
one ever gets a 5.
I'm such a 5-starer. 5 stars the default, and then you're working your way down.
And so, they have a good reason to make me feel affirmed.
Yeah,
and, we can say this is all just
talk
like
about mental health, right? Those things influence your mental health, and mental health influences all health factors. So like it improves your health outcomes by acknowledging your identity and affirming it.
Yeah. And it just makes even that experience a positive one, and they should be. Your interactions with healthcare should be positive experiences. You shouldn't just be looking for positive outcomes. It should be a positive experience.
Yeah, I think this is like a really good segue into something that we like to talk about. Obviously, representation matters, right? So representation of our experiences, our realities, our population, everyone inside the BI+ community. But how do we talk about BI+ inclusion in programs and services outside of, and I'm thinking about the potential HIV ad that you modeled for, where they're like, oh, do you want to get a guy on this shoulder, a girl on this shoulder? You know what I mean? Like there is that awkward tropey stuff, like that's like, oh, that's actually not comfy. And so there's a great resource. I'm kind of referencing a few resources from the Bi Resource Center today because they're so great. And so this resource is 10 tips for Bi plus inclusion in programs and services. This is specifically for LGBTQ elders, but a lot of it rings true for the general Bi plus community. The first thing, and Steve, you're a great advocate for this, is just include Bi plus sensitivity training by bisexuals. And it feels so simple, and this is probably the part that is most overlooked. This is just, if you are making services for LGBT inclusion and that are targeting LGBT communities, it needs to be bi-inclusive, and it needs to have specific training and involvement from the Bi plus community. It's kind of a bare minimum. And the ones that do it are so obvious because they just hit, right? Like there's a reason that the Bish study, it just feels so comfy to do because there's bisexuals all the way through that creation of that process.
And it's unfortunate that a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of health departments will just go LGBTIQ plus. As long as someone in that group is doing the sensitivity training for that entire group, then they're fine. And unfortunately, as bi people, we know that our fellow queer people don't necessarily know a lot about us and shouldn't. It is inappropriate for non-bi people to be speaking on their behalf. And that's inclusive within LGBTIQ plus. We can't be spoken for. We have to speak for ourselves.
Yeah. Another one. One of the points on that. The next point on this resource is using inclusive language, and this again sounds so simple, but even just different events I've been to this week or previously, the idea of the gay community, right, is this kind of broad, sweeping way to say queer people or LGBTQIA plus people. And there's always this kind of nudge from the bisexual next to me, like, oh, you hear it? They said gay community.
I know.
Do they not mean us?
And I feel like we're the only ones that notice it because we are affected by it. And people just roll their eyes and like, oh, you know what we mean. And it's like, exactly. I can get over it. But I'm actively choosing to not get over it. This is a hill that I'm going to die on.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I get that. I get that feeling from people. It's like, okay, dude, just move on and listen to them tell their story. It's like, I will do both though. Like I can listen and honor what you are trying to say, and I can still ask you to make a correction, and I can still, because language matters, right? Our thoughts and our language influence not just how we make people feel, but they influence decisions like funding, like people on funding boards or judging panels, all that kind of stuff will use language like the gay community. And then we see that 89% or whatever it is, I can't remember, of funding goes towards gay organizations or LGBTQI plus organizations, with the majority of funding going to programs for the gay community. But if we change our language, then it just becomes this almost, it changes your worldview. It kind of takes the blindness from here to here. Like, it's like, cool,
if we're not visible, we don't exist.
Exactly.
If we're not visible, we don't exist.
So it sounds naff and it sounds like we're being persnickety, right? But we are being intentional because those things actually have an impact on the bottom line of our community's health outcomes.
Huge. It is the single biggest barrier currently because we're just not seen.
I don't want to be the person that keeps saying, stop saying Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. You know what I mean? Like name changes are important for inclusion as well. Like again, Sydney Gay Dads. I'm apparently allowed to go to Sydney Gay Dads as a queer parent, but it takes me to have to toil over it and then go, oh, I don't want to take up space because
This
I
is
want to
the
honor,
other
like,
thing.
I want to honor gay specific, like communities. You know what I mean? I don't want to take up that space.
Yeah.
And then I go, okay, well, I am looking for peer support. So, look, I'm going to email them. And then they go, oh, yeah, of course you're welcome. It's like, what do you mean, of course? Like, and then now it's a thing, and I have to go through that kind of labor of asking. And that's true of all our queer orgs. They're all gay and lesbian or whatever it might be. Like, it is important for those others like us to feel included.
Yeah. And so when bringing this back to sexual health, it's like you'll often talk about gay clinics. So you go down to the gay clinic and it's like, well, is that for me? And when it'll be called like, a gay clinic or gay clinics near you, gay clinics in your state.
You're getting carded at the door, just like, where's your gay card?
At the door. and you look into the fine print and they'll say gay and bisexual men, but you just sort of get that gut feeling, and we all know that feeling. It's like, okay, so I'm welcome in there, but they don't know me.
Yeah. And even the language which we see in research, men who have sex with men, right? It's like, that's not bisexual people, right? Because like, I am a bisexual man. I am not a man who has sex with men, right? Like, and the same is true for our bi-ace community, or that doesn't even touch on the language of trans inclusion, right? Of like, okay, who do you mean when you say this? And so, I mean, that's a large conversation about research and language, but I think also, on the flip side of language is also marketing materials and like visuals. Like, if we want to show this is a queer space, a queer sexual health organization, you are seeing same-sex couples, right? You are seeing 2 guys, 2 girls in imagery, photo shoots, videos, whatever it might be. You go buy some stock photography online, you are getting same-sex couples. And again, as someone who is not in a same-sex couple, but is loud and proud and queer, that doesn't represent me. Am I welcome here? Like, are these services for me? And so being really intentional about who do you include. Luckily, there's a new fantastic health center opening up in Sydney later this month, I believe, in next month.
Yeah, this month, yeah.
And it's called Kaleido Health. You will see a big old bisexual in some of those materials because my face is a part of the Kaleido Health advertising material. They are very clever. Most of the visual aids of single people, of solo people, it's not couples. So sexual health is also not about couples necessarily, right? Like, yes, sex is usually, and not always, but partaken with another. You can have solo sex as well.
Yes, you can.
But it is, at the end of the day, your experience. So I don't think that's a bad way to do it, of just decoupling people in those visual materials.
Or using other visual representations and things. And I'm just like, it's very 2008 to have the guy and the girl on the shoulder. I'm like, we're so past that. But then there's the other tired one, if you like. So I know about these ads because I was part of an organization that puts them out there. But on a lot of, I was about to say gay apps because that is how they advertise themselves, but apps for queer men who are looking to meet other queer men. I think we know all the apps I'm talking about. There are lots of sexual health ads that are directed at bi men, but it purely talks about their secrecy. And so it'll be like, I can't remember the language, but it's like,
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, down low, which is language I have a big problem with. Because the way that we are viewed within sexual health, and so this is some insider info, the way we're viewed is either we are just gay men, we're just gay men, or we are severely closeted, living in the outer suburbs, sleeping behind our wives' backs, spreading STIs, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And some of the photography they've got is a guy from behind holding his kid's hand and talking about like the language is like, we keep your secret, like we're discreet like you, or something like that.
Wow, that's atrocious.
It is atrocious.
Wow, you can just say like, "Come on in," like, and like, well, okay.
I believe that was our state health.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess to honor the experience, there are a lot of people who use DL and are in the closet and are seeking sexual relations or whatever outside of their relationship. That is a truism. That is real.
Yes.
And you do have to try and target those people, and you do need to use language that they get and they latch onto. Though that is fraught. It is tricky. It is admirable to try, and the fact that there is any campaigns for it at all is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I don't have the answers for it, but they are usually not by informed, right?
No, they aren't. They are not.
I guess a lot of those people don't openly use the phrasing and identity of bisexual as well. So it's a whole gray area outside of the common language that you and I are quite used to, because these people are typically, and we will definitely do an episode on this in the future, straight men, bunny ears, right? Straight men who are having sexual intercourse with people who may or may not honor that identification.
Yes, but as we were talking about before, the power of language, and this is what I advocate so strongly for within the health space, is we have used sexual health, especially here in Australia. We've got a very strong HIV sector, a very strong sexual health sector. The fact that our largest LGBTIQ plus health organisation here in the country is a health organisation, the AIDS Council of New South Wales, ACON. They're the ones that do everything. They're a huge organisation. As queer people, we understand the power of being able to destigmatize experiences through sexual health language and advertising. It was through the AIDS crisis that we actually created much of our gay liberation. We can do the same thing for bi people. Are we just continuing and building upon and normalizing and saying, oh, it's normal? I don't think it's normal for people to be closeted. I think it's normal for people to be out and to be, we know that people are happier, healthier, everything when they're out. I think there is great power in us to, in a very sensitive and a bi-informed way, speak to people in the BIPOC community, like these closeted men that we are trying to target sexual health advertising towards. Maybe to instead of say like, oh, it's okay to be in that situation, and I'm saying it is okay to be in this situation, but also offering there is
a new pathway or pipeline towards self-discovery, identification, services, resources.
Exactly. Is anything I'm saying making sense?
No, that's also, I feel like, because like, I think these straight boys or whoever it might be in these circumstances who are having this experience, I don't think they see an ad about bisexual sexual health and go, that's not me. I think the connection is made of like, oh, that could be talking about me actually because I'm engaging in this. I think people would connect the dots.
We're constantly telling them, and this is true. What I'm about to say is true. It is okay to be in the closet. It is okay to have that life. I think that we are not offered enough of the alternative of saying it's okay to be bisexual. Yep. We're not told nearly often enough. I wish we spent as much money telling bi men it was okay to be a bi man as we do telling closeted bi men it's okay to be a closeted bi man.
Fucking amen. I mean, look, there's a reason you and I sing the phrase, just say the word, just say bisexual, because we know the impacts it can have positively on people's lives to come out. We can talk about sexual health forever, and we will talk about it forever. The podcast isn't going away anytime soon, but thank you for listening, everybody, to the first episode of our Bi Health Month series. It can be a bit heavy, but I feel like this wasn't too heavy. It felt productive.
It's good. People should go away from this knowing that this is just a normal part. The way that you feel as well is perfectly normal.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about our own experiences. We've been vulnerable on the pod. And grab some resources, even if they're not directly targeted at you, as we've talked about. It not often is, but your health is really important. And step through that icky feeling and get the information, just the specific information that you need.
I'll make sure to put some links in the description. We've got some great links to all this stuff for the Bi Resource Center. Thank you for listening. My ask for you this week is to subscribe to the podcast on your podcast listening platform of choice. We have a lot of new people who have joined us this week. Thank you very much to all those who have come along. If you want to join the conversation, please follow us on social media. That is at Give It To Me Bi, and jump into our Facebook group where we like to kind of continue the conversation outside of the prying eyes of people outside of the community. You can have private conversations in our Facebook group, or you can email us if you are not doing the Meta Facebook thing at the moment. Subscribe to our newsletter. All those links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. We are Give It To Me Bi. Love you so much.
And happy Mardi Gras to everyone.
To
all observers.
To all observers.
If you so observe, happy Mardi Gras.
Happy Mardi Gras. Love you.
Thanks, everyone. Love you.